So in this segment, we're now going to disassemble the frame and do what Christopher Schwartz calls the make pretty, and I just kind of like that term. We're going to go through each one of the parts, get rid of any blemishes, any dents, any pencil marks, that kind of stuff. And this would be the time that if you wanted a glass smooth finish, it would be the most efficient time to do all your sanding and planing and stuff like that. I will tell you this, all I'm going to be doing is kind of getting rid of some pencil marks and rounding over all the edges, because pine, especially this kind of pine, you pretty much have to do that one, otherwise you're going to start snagging stuff on the corners and it will splinter. Pine, you can't really have really sharp edges with it. You've got to blunt them somehow so that it will stay durable. And after that, we are going to glue up the frame. Now, if you are using this as a practice piece for like a traditional frame and panel case piece, like a desk or a blanket chest, I need you to understand they typically do not glue up this piece before the panels are made. Let me explain why. So right now we have made our legs and our rails or stretchers or whatever you want to call them, and we joined them together with a good solid mortise and tenon joint on all four legs. Okay. Now, this kind of construction, the frame and then putting a panel in the middle to take up the gap, because having a big piece of wood right there would invite failure in our piece, because the wood would expand and contract, and they could not depend upon glue back in the 1500s, which in Europe is when this style of construction became really commonplace. It was around beforehand, but that's when they had to fill up big areas of wood, they used this frame and panel design. And the idea for it was you would kind of mimic the frame. We would create two side pieces going up and down all the way to the top. Then you would have top and bottom, and these two would be joined with either a bridle joint, a slip joint, a lap joint, or a mortise and tenon joint. And then with a groove, you would put in a solid panel there, which could expand and contract within that groove. And if you pegged it in the middle somehow, the gap on either side would be used. It wouldn't be moving all the way over. That would make that panel very solid. But to mount it into the frame, they would take these stretchers right here and put a mortise and tenon on those. So, in construction, you would assemble your frame, then you would drop your rails on top of the frame, and then you would put your legs in there. So, the only joint that was critical that could never separate if you wanted your piece to stay together is this joint right here. And a lot of times they would either draw bore or peg it because they did not trust the fish glue or hide glue they were using. As long as that stayed together, the panel was never coming out unless you just, destroyed it on purpose. That is traditional frame and panel furniture construction. And once again, if you're making a table or a blanket chest or something like that, this is the way I would suggest you do it. But we're doing this as a learning exercise, and we have already learned how to do the mortise and tenon joint. So I wanted to show you a few other techniques that you could practice, that you could apply in other things. So we're going to take this time to go ahead and glue our frame together, ignoring the panel right now, because I'm going to use those other techniques, and we're going to fit the panel to the hole, I guess. Now, when you disassemble this, remember, we have glued up this bottom shelf. It cannot move this way, so we have to separate the piece this way and then take out the side pieces after the shelf comes out. Now before I disassemble the side legs, I'm going to take just a little ruler. I'm going to mark a line about 1 inch down from the bottom of this little stretcher. I'm doing this because that's going to be the top of my taper. I personally don't really like legs that go straight all the way down the ground. I like a little bit of taper to them. Maybe it's because I've been staring at some of the stuff I built in the very beginning in my shop, and they all have just monolithic legs going down. I think it adds a little bit of elegance. So if I can add, just a taper of about 1/3, I think it'll look nice. And I like to do that on my legs. Now, doing tapers like this does not have to be overly complicated. I know you can make, table saw jigs for tapering jigs and stuff like that. And I imagine someday I will do that very thing. But I'm lazy, so all I'm going to do is mark out the line and solder the line. I'll probably do mine with some bandsaw cuts. But if you don't want to do that one, really, if you're just tapering a little bit, just grab a hand plane. You make a few swipes progressing back, you'll reach your line that you're tapering on. And that's how they traditionally did it. So you don't have to have anything special to add little decorative touches. Now typically when you do a taper, you always do it to the inside. So if this is the show corner on the 4 outside corners, I want to be coming into that side because I want the table leg to be at its widest point. And you can read a lot of books and stuff like that. I think a lot of people have a lot of design theories about how much of a taper to add to stuff and everything. I personally kind of think it's just that we followed the same design rules for so long, it looks right to us now. We've made it right. It probably isn't some universal law. One of them is dividing stuff into thirds. So if I come over here and I divide my leg into thirds, well, if I take off 1/3, supposedly that taper will look right to people. So right there is where 1/3 of the leg coming off would be. So if I set some kind of rule to that size, I know I can be fairly consistent in all of my tapers. So now all I got to do is find the line I have up here. You put your pencil on it, you bring the ruler up to your pencil, that way it's locked in there, and then you line it up down here with your other side, and there you go. Whoops. Then step back and admire it. You want to make it more or less. Then you can do the same exact thing to the other side. And it's just a matter of using that rule to mark out your bases, making sure you got the long side towards your show corner. Place your pencil right on the pencil line, that becomes a pivot point. Pivot it down to the bottom side and mark your line. And then double check that both sides taper down to your show corner. It's very easy to get this mixed up and then cut off the wrong part. Now remember when all the way back to the beginning, when we were designing stuff and laying it out, we were picking which parts should go in there. Well, we always picked these pieces right here to be the bottom of the leg. Why? Remember that taper? Notice how the taper is now following the grain, because we picked up that the grain was kind of coming down to this angle at this portion of the board. Same on this one. So if you pick it out and you have forethought in the very beginning, you can let the grain kind of follow the design. From here, it's just going to be a matter of setting up your bandsaw, making sure you are perpendicular, lining the line up. Remember, you're feeding the teeth on these lines. So position your board, get the line straight, and then use your second hand. You have one hand providing propulsion. This hand is guiding the direction. I'm pressing it in and out right here to feed that in right there. Lock it down into the bed so you don't risk touching the blade, and just kind of feed it through. the finger is going to be moving ever so slightly as the taper reduces to keep it straight. Now for me, the make pretty is kind of relaxed. I have my little quarter round plane, and all I'm doing right now for about 10 minutes is sitting in this chair and I read the grain. Grain's running this way, so I'm going to plane that way. I'll take a few short swipes, make sure the grain's going in the right direction, and then it's just round over the corners. Read grain, test, round. Read, test, round. Just kind of a nice relaxing exercise. And you know, you do this for a few projects and this reading the grain becomes second nature. You're just kind of real quickly picking up, like in this board right there, it could be going in two different directions. That's why I do that little test. And you could feel it. You develop a feel. Oh, in case y'all noticed, yes, I broke my bandsaw blade and taken off the very first taper I did for the camera. So I ended up doing something kind of stupid. I just clamped them to my workbench and I used a circular saw to take off those tapers. It worked. I'm not going to show y'all because I don't think it's a beginner's exercise, but hey, carpenters do it all the time doing rafters and stuff like that. It was the first time I ever did anything like that, and that's just because I was too lazy to grab a handsaw and just saw it off, which is what I should have done, but it's kind of a thrill trying something a little dangerous. Now with the legs, I do something a little bit different. I'm going to set my block plane up to take a somewhat heavy cut. If you notice, I left the pencil line when I was sawing off with that circular saw, and I would have done the same thing with the bandsaw, just slightly off of it. And my pencil line is still here. So I'm actually going to plane that last, 64th of an inch just off of a single point. Get a little bit lower than that. And my idea is I'm coming back until I see this line right here disappear evenly. And that'll mean I have a straight line here and it'll be somewhat in plane coming across. I do not have much to remove over here. So it's just a few quick passes. You notice I'm not taking off much now because there's a lot of wave there, and it's only taken off. It's taken off a big bite, but it's a lot. As soon as you got smooth shadings all the way down, you know you have a flat plane. And I've a little bit more on this side. And I now have a straight line coming across here. Do the same to this side. Have a lot more to remove on this side. Most of my weight is pushing down at front right now. I'm at my line down here. I'm a little off over here, so I start taking short passes here, a little farther, and if you can see, I'm kind of lifting up. Then take full passes. Remove half the line right there. Come over this side. Half the line there. So now one more pass. Smooths it all out. No ridges, no nothing. Now I'm going to take the round over, come over. What's cool is when you have a taper, you know this is the direction you always go downhill to take off the taper. Very easy to read. Next, I got a lot of pencil lines and some little dents and some knife marks and stuff like that. So I grabbed my wood eraser and just take care of those items. Just like that, they're gone. Read your grain. And there we go. Last little bit is I'm going to come over, I'm going to put a pretty heavy chamfer on this corner. Notice how I'm doing this? The blade, I'm coming down and I'm skewering it over the edge. Can you see that? I'm not coming straight across, I'm not going straight down, I'm kind of slicing it off. Just take the same number, I take 6, and you'll get a nice clean cut across the end grain. There you go. Finally, we are doing the glue up. And I don't really know what to tell you on this one. It's kind of, if you've done one glue up, you've done another. All of them. You know, first take a Valium or something like that to calm down. No, I'm kidding on that one. Just go at it. Know it's going to be stressful. It's not that big a deal. I like doing sections at a time, letting them dry so I'm not overly rushed. So on this one, we know we're going to have to glue up the short ends first because the long ends require these tins to go in and they're perfectly sized. So I've laid out the 2 ends that I want to do as my shorts. Grab my glue. We're just going to do those first. Give it about 15 minutes and then do the rest. Don't be skimpy on the glue, but don't overindulge. Try to lay the glue in the parts that you're going to be pushing the glue in. For example, I will generally just put glue on the mortises and not the tenon because the tenon will kind of squeeze it down. If you put a lot on the tenon, it kind of squeezes it out and you get blowout. But that's just me. If you want to put glue on both ends, go for it. Well, there we go. All clamped up, so the pressure is gone. Now in the morning, I will probably come in and I will drive a peg in each one of these, simply drilling a hole and putting in an oak dowel. That's simply an aesthetic application because of the modern PVA glues. If it is really functional, I would have drawboarded it. And I have videos out there if you want to try that on your own, so you don't even have to use glue in this setup. But it's kind of everything else I have is a drawboard, so I'm going to peg this one just for the cosmetic aspect of it. So, come back in the next segment and we will make the rolling base.